box landed on my doorstep. Opening it up, I found the system itself and a power cable packaged reasonably well. There didn't appear to be any physical damage, but the outside definitely was a little dirty. Opening it up, it was unsurprising to find a pretty dusty interior, complete with very dirty fans, the occasional dust bunny, and a thick layer of dust on most surfaces. But before I started messing around with anything, I plugged the system into power and a monitor to make sure it turned on. Luckily it did and seemed to function, so I powered it down and was ready to move on to the next step. I decided to start by taking the internals out to have a better look at them and to clean them off individually. I started with the CPU cooler, unscrewing it and lifting it out. Next I unplugged the various power and data connectors, then removed the back exhaust fan, pulled out the power supply, and finally unscrewed and removed the motherboard itself. I popped out the RAM stick, removed the SSD, and used some isopropyl alcohol to remove the old thermal paste on the CPU. To clean the motherboard, I used a combination of a soft bristle brush and a hand vacuum to remove most of the dust. This technically could cause static, but I've never had a problem with it. Then I could move on to cleaning the CPU cooler, including the heatsink itself, along with the fan, which had a lot of dust on it. The final things to clean were the exhaust fan, and I also quickly did the case itself. So now that everything's been lightly cleaned off, let's look at what parts come with this $120 PC. The CPU that came installed is the AMD Ryzen 3 3400G, which is a 4-core 8-thread APU that can turbo up to 4.2 GHz. It also has built-in Vega 11 graphics that can actually play some games, which we'll take a look at in a minute. 4 cores and 8 threads, while not ideal, is still perfectly fine for budget gaming, especially for esports titles and lighter AAA games. This 3400G is sitting inside of this very proprietary HP AM4 board. It kinda looks like if you took a micro ATX board into Photoshop and just stretched it very wide. This board has 2 DIMM slots, an NVMe M.2 slot, a 1x PCIe slot, and a 16x PCIe slot. The back panel I/O is pretty lackluster, but the board's built-in front I/O does make up for this a bit. There's also an M.2 Wi-Fi card that attaches to antennas built into the case. For RAM, the system came with a single 8GB stick of DDR4 memory at 3200 MHz. 8 gigs of single channel RAM is far from ideal, so this is definitely a place we'll look at upgrading. For storage, the system came with a 256GB WD-SM530 NVMe SSD. 256GB is enough for your OS, applications, and maybe 1 or 2 games, so this is definitely another area we're going to look at to upgrade. Also, to cool the CPU, the system's using a very basic aluminum cooler with a 92mm fan attached. This does get the job done, but temps do get pretty hot at times, which you'll be able to see in the benchmark section of the video. For the power supply, this PC is using what might be a TFX form factor or just some proprietary form factor power supply. This is rated for a measly 180 watts of total output, but is 80+ gold rated, which is nice to see. Taking a look at the connectors, you can see this is far from a standard power supply with these dual 4-pin connectors and whatever this little connector is. All these parts went back inside of this also very non-standard case from HP, which has a subjectively nice clean aesthetic to it in my opinion. All in, for $120, this is a perfectly capable office PC to run Windows 11 for basic tasks, and while this is definitely not a gaming system, I did want to test it quickly so we can get some baseline numbers. Starting in Valorant at 1080p low, I saw an 88 FPS average with 1% lows of 26. This didn't feel great, and I don't know if this experience would even be good enough for casual play. In Fortnite at 1080p in performance mode with basically everything set to low, it was a bit of a mess. Just landing in and seeing the textures take forever to load in was pretty hilarious, and over the course of the match I saw a 51 FPS average with very poor 1% lows of 10. Again, this was not a great experience, and I probably wouldn't consider this playable myself. For the heck of it, I loaded up a few AAA games. In Borderlands 3 at 1080p low, I saw a 17 FPS average with 1% lows of 13, and in Cyberpunk it was also basically a slideshow at 1080p low when I saw 11 FPS average and 1% lows of 7. So not really playable in any of these games, but there's one quick upgrade we can make that might change this, and this is upgrading the system memory. Right now, with 8 gigs of single channel RAM, we are heavily hindering our CPU and iGPU performance. Now the thing I would recommend doing is buying another identical stick of memory off of eBay, which a few months ago would have been like 10 or 15 bucks, but unfortunately with recent RAM price increases, this is more like $30+ for another 8GB stick. I forgot to order one for this project, so I just decided to switch the single stick out for another kit that I had on hand. To my surprise, a bunch of my known working kits were only showing one stick in use when I installed them into the system. The kit I ended up getting to work is this basic ADATA set of 2x8GB at 2666 MHz, which isn't ideal but is definitely better than single channel RAM. I bought this 16GB kit a year ago for a little over $20, but again, these are going for like $50+ a kit now, which is unfortunate. So just to reiterate, I would recommend just trying to find and buy an identical stick to the existing one and doing research on what memory is known to be working with your system before purchasing. So does going from 8GB of single channel RAM to 16GB of dual channel RAM make any difference in gaming? Well, actually yes. In Valorant at 1080p low, I saw an increase in average FPS by about 50% and an over 100% increase in 1% lows. This took the experience from borderline.
Why is it every time life starts going right, something crashes down and I'm back in the fight? I try to stay strong, try to keep my head clear, but the darkest thoughts are the ones I hear. Voices telling me to give in to the pain, telling me I'll never be enough again. Like everything I do still falls apart, leaving questions burning in my heart. Why wasn't I enough for you back then? Was my love too real, too honest, too genuine? Your anger left scars deeper than skin, echoes of your words still living within. But I won't give up tonight, even when the battle's in my mind, even when the darkness tries to pull me under. I remember the reason I'm still alive. Some nights I'm lying in bed fighting tears, trying to silence every voice that appears. Feeling like disappearing might ease the pain, like nobody would notice if I faded away. But then I think about my sister in the weight that remain, how my
Hello. Okay. Yeah, everyone could hear me now.